The Secrets of Doctor Who is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who. Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about the hit BBC series, Doctor Who. And today we're discussing the 11th Doctor story, Hide. Joining me today on the panel are Jimmy Akin. Hi, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
And Father Cory Sticha. Stop hiding, Father Cory. Oh, wait. No. There you are.
Yeah.
Father Cory.
Boo.
Boo. So, folks, remember to like The Secrets of Doctor Who on Facebook at facebook.com/Secrets of Doctor Who. Retweet us on Twitter, where we're at SQPN, and be sure to leave us comments in both places. Also, I want to tell you about another show on the network that you will be sure to enjoy called The Secrets of Stargate, featuring our own Father Cory Sticha, and that's been going excellently. And if you like Stargate, and you should like Stargate if you haven't even watched it yet, because it is one of the best sci-fi out there, you can find it wherever fine podcasts are found, or at sqpn.com/Stargate. So we are talking about this 11th Doctor story called Hide. And Jimmy, could you give us a recap?
This week, Doctor Who does the 1982 movie Poltergeist, except it's 1974, and the Doctor and Clara have come to a remote British country home that is being haunted by a ghost. The ghost is being studied by a parapsychologist and a psychic he's brought to help him, and who he's not so secretly in love with. The Doctor determines that the ghost is actually a time traveler trapped in a pocket universe, and with the psychic's help, he brings her back to our universe. In the process, the Doctor himself gets stuck in the pocket universe, and it takes the combined efforts of the psychic and Clara, who has finally convinced the TARDIS to trust her, to rescue him. In the end, the Doctor realizes that there's more than one person that needs to be rescued, including a hideous monster that's trapped in the pocket universe and desperately wants to be reunited with his beloved hideous monster in our universe. And he ultimately saves the day. The end.
So, Jimmy, this one is right up your alley, right? This is a Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World episode.
This is remarkably up my alley. Just recently, I have been reading a lot about the investigation of apparitions and poltergeists and hauntings. And in fact, I'm enrolled in a couple of classes at the Rhine Institute, which is a famous parapsychological institute founded by J.B. Rhine. I'm like, this semester, I'm taking advanced field studies for how to investigate these things. Upon the successful completion of the course, I would be qualified to be listed in their directory of ghost hunters, basically. They don't like that term, but paranormal investigators.
Cool.
And throughout this episode, I was ticking off in my head all the bits of realism in this. This is actually pretty grounded. I mean, it's fantastic, but there's lots of, this is really how parapsychologists would investigate things like this.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept in my head ticking off the characteristics of, okay, would this be classified as a haunting or an apparition or a poltergeist? Because those have technical characteristics that people look for to classify it one way or another.
Yeah. And
this shares elements of all of them.
That's pretty cool. I have to say, as an aside, I'm looking forward to when you get your as a certificate, I think, as an official.
Yeah.
That will be some interesting episodes of Mysterious World.
One thing that a lot of people may not realize, now they'll know about poltergeists, which is German for noisy ghost, because poltergeists involve moving objects, characteristically will involve moving objects and sounds and things like that. Apparition means something a little different than what it does in a Catholic context. It doesn't mean an apparition of a saint. It just means there's a personality manifesting. But the one that would be most surprising to people is the characteristics of hauntings is a seeming absence of a personality that you can interact with. They're compared to like recordings of a historical event that just keeps replaying itself. But there's not like a person that you can talk to. And in a lot of ways, this initially seems like a haunting because the witch of the well, or whatever they call her, is the spirit that's haunting this house, is like always manifesting in the same position. And, you know, like she's always got this outstretched arm and stuff. And she always does the same thing. And it like just replays itself as an experience. And we ultimately learn the reason for that, which is that the spirit is actually a time traveler in a time travel experiment gone wrong from the future. And she's stuck in a universe where time is playing at a slower rate than it is in our universe. So she's like been living throughout the history of the Earth in this parallel universe, but for her, it's been 3 minutes.
Although I have to point out that the time in that pocket universe moves at pace of plot. Because once the Doctor shows up there,
it shifts.
Yeah. It moves at the same pace. Yeah.
Ish, except it doesn't end up burning itself out in the 3 minutes they keep going back to it.
That's true.
So, but in any event, she then becomes a personality, but originally it's more like a haunting.
One of the things, speaking of haunting, the notes on the TARDIS wiki says that this is based on the 1959 version of the movie The Haunting of Hill House, which I know has had a recent, very popular remake that's on Netflix, I think, or something. I'm not a horror movie fan, so I don't know so much about that.
There's another movie that has some similarities to this. It's a 1960s black and white American film just called The Haunting. And it has some really, for a 1960s black and white film, it's got some really scary stuff in it. Very minimalist, but there's this scene where you have these, it's just riveting, where you have these two women who are in this, they've taken shelter in a bedroom together, and they hear something coming down the hall, and the sound is sort of like footsteps, but it's also sort of mechanical, and it's got this rasping, scraping, unidentifiable quality to it. And it gets to the door of their bedroom, and the door is wood, but it's got like, you know, panels in it, you know, like it's like a 6-panel door or something. And it just starts bending into the room with them, the wood. It just like pulses, and it's pulsing with this noise. And you're just going, what on earth could that be? Wow. And it's really effective, but that's irrelevant. I just like that scene.
So, I mean, this is really a sort of gothic horror story, right? I mean, this is like the Fourth Doctor, like we just talked about last time in the Seeds of Doom, where the what was it? The Doctor was in a old. Well, I mean, the Fourth Doctor often in that period of time went to these old manor houses on, you know, in England, and where strange things were happening, and it was sort of a gothic horror sort of thing, and they really went full horror story style in this one.
Yeah, one thing I was thinking is this would be a fantastic Halloween episode. I mean, because the Halloween ghosts and things that go bump in the night and all that. I mean, it really kind of plays on a lot of those tropes that we're, you know, familiar with a lot of the not so much horror, but, you know, like the Halloween type tales.
Yeah.
I had a tendency to confuse this in my mind with a couple of other episodes of Doctor Who, both from the 12th Doctor's time.
I know which ones, yeah.
One of them, one of them was Deep Breath.
Yeah.
And that's just because the Doctor says shush in it.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And then the other one is Listen.
That's what I was thinking.
Where they, which was really they should have saved the title of this episode, Hide, because it doesn't really, no one's hiding here.
Yeah.
People are trapped. That's not the same thing.
Yeah.
And they should have saved this title and called it something else, and then called the 12th Doctor episode Hide, because it's about the search for a being that is perfectly adapted to hiding.
Is that the one in the TARDIS? The Listen?
No, Listen is where they use the TARDIS to try to like find the unfindable.
Okay. That's the one with the big lump in the bed.
The lump in the bed. Yes,
that's how I remember
Oh,
it,
yeah.
because that scared the heck out of me when I was a kid. Anything like that would scare me. So, yeah.
What's
I
the
used to
other
think of
one
that.
you were thinking of?
No, that's the one I was thinking of. I hadn't thought of Deep Breath, but I was definitely thinking of Listen, and maybe the one in the TARDIS, which is the
Journey to the Center of the TARDIS? That's next episode.
no, it's a 12th Doctor one where he's on the TARDIS with somebody else who he's alone, but something else is there with him. I'm trying to remember what
And
the
it's
name.
not Listen.
Maybe it's the same one. Maybe I got I've separated into 2 episodes, so maybe it's the same episode. Regardless, let's talk about this one, I guess.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, like you said, it's a dark and stormy night in 1974, as all good ghost stories are. And the 2 investigators. So there's the one, Professor Alec Palmer, who is apparently a former World War II spy. I think he's got a history. And I like that they kind of hint at this dark history, although they don't do more with it. It's kind of funny. They've kind of created this character, but they don't do much with that in this story, I think.
It may depend on your perspective. I thought they integrated it fairly well.
Okay.
Because he's a former British special operatives agent from World War II, and he did a bunch of stuff that we learn about in dialogue. The Doctor talks about his career as a covert operative in World War II, where he was, thwarting various Axis plots and military ventures and stuff. And he killed people, he acknowledges, and he sent people to be killed. He had people, men and women under his command, apparently, who he would send on one-way missions. And as a result of killing and sending people to be killed, he has survivor's guilt now in a big way, and it's preventing him from moving on with his life. And so he's got this young psychic woman who he's got to be like 30 years older than.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And she's in love with him and he's in love with her, but he's so stuck on his survivor's guilt that he's not able to act and move forward with the romance that's staring him in the face.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she is an empathic psychic, so which is a little ironic because she senses these feelings, but I like the fact that they say, because Clara calls her out and says, well, you must know how he feels then. And she says, no, when you're an empathic psychic, sometimes you project your own, your wish fulfillment, what you wish on the feelings of others, which is kind of cool.
On the people you care about. Yeah. And in remote viewing, that's called analytical overlay.
Right.
This is just the emotional equivalent.
Yeah. Which is interesting.
And, she should look familiar if you watch Adventure in Space and Time, because she was played by Jessica Raine, who played Verity Lambert, the first producer of Doctor Who on Adventure in Space and Time.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, that's why she looked familiar. Yeah, so the Doctor and Clara show up at the door, posing as inspectors from, quote unquote, the ministry.
Yeah.
It's like from the government in the American context would be, or the Bureau. And they've come. It's interesting how they progress emotionally through this episode, because they start off kind of like on a lark. Hey, we're here to do a ghost hunting thing.
I love actually the dialogue they use in that scene, because there's the professor or major, and he's both, and the psychic Emma Grayling have just had a contact with the ghost, and they hear this knocking at the door, and they're thinking it may be the ghost, and he opens it and there's no one there at first, and then the Doctor leans out and says, "Boo." And he explains, "I'm looking for a ghost." And the professor says, "And you are?" And Clara leans in and says, "Ghostbusters." Which actually would make more sense to them in 1974 than you'd think. Because, Ghostbusters is famously a 1980s movie.
Right.
That gave us that phrase in popular culture. But the term Ghostbusters has been around a lot longer. They were also called Ghost Breakers. And so you will find pre-1980s discussions of Ghostbusters and Ghost Breakers.
There was even actually a show called Ghostbusters prior to the movie that they had to buy the rights to, the name.
Yeah, it was, if it's the one I'm thinking of, it was the Saturday morning cartoon that starred Forrest Tucker and Larry Storch.
Yep.
And the character, I remember watching that as a kid in the 70s, and the characters were known, it was 2 guys and a gorilla,
Yep.
And they would crack ghost cases.
Yeah.
And it was a Saturday morning comedy, and their names as characters were Spencer, Tracy, and Kong. And Kong was not the gorilla.
That's right.
Tracy was the gorilla, and Kong was Forrest Tucker.
Yep.
That's funny.
I remember.
Yeah, but even before that, you'll find like Ghostbuster, Ghostbreaker movies and stuff like back in the 40s and things like that.
Interesting. So one of the things I really love was when the doctor gets in and sees all the equipment, the paranormal investigation equipment, and he likes, I love a good switch and flipping the switches. And I could relate because all that old electronic equipment, all that hardware is so cool. And it is satisfying to flip these switches, and they're just so, I don't know. I'm a electronics geek, but
I'm with you on that. It's something so tactile about actually hitting a switch instead of using your remote control or whatever. The old audiovisual equipment, the old sound system equipment. Where it actually had knobs and switches instead of just a bunch of buttons like they do today.
Right. Yeah, I grew up in that period, but I'm much more 21st century. When I look at that tech, I think, wow, this is really limited. There's not much you can do with it, and it's very unreliable.
Well,
I want a graphical user interface with clickable icons and a touchscreen and integrated functioning that works reliably. I want my iPhone to do it. It's a reliable early mother box technology.
Well, see, that's the thing. I want the functionality. I want my iPhone, but it's just so cool to flip the switches. There's a company that sells, we're way off on tangents today, but there's a company that sells panels, mock-up panels from the old Apollo capsules that don't do anything, but they're just switches. So there's a market out there for that sort of thing. Anyway.
The doctor also, after geeking out over the tech they've got there, and that is something you find in paranormal investigations of situations like this, they will try to use technology to document the phenomena and be able to study it. Also, he refers to Emma Grayling, the psychic, as non-objective equipment. And actually, that's true too. Their paranormal investigators will frequently bring in a psychic or more than one to get their impressions of what they think is going on here. And they'll also bring in magicians to look for hoaxing.
Right.
But we don't have a magician in this episode.
No, if you don't consider the doctor a magician. Sometimes he acts like one.
He doesn't have the control needed to be a magician.
That's true.
Not this doctor.
Yep. So we get the background on the ghost. It's been in the house longer than there's been a house. It was called the Witch of the Well. One of the things they said during World War II, American soldiers that were stationed in the house left it offerings of spam, along with they found notes, for the love of God, stop screaming. That which is really an awesome, creepy, bit to add in there because that's such a creepy thing. Please stop screaming. Like you said, she's always in the same pose in photos, which I think is interesting. And then there's a manifestation. The Doctor and Clara, therefore, another manifestation. They have this banging, the cold air starts, it gets very cold. And this spinning disc appears in midair. And then the ghost comes and says, help me. And although at first she says it backwards. Yeah. Plem. And then it appears on the wall in ghostly script.
And that's really cool where he's just standing there and you've got this, it's not brightly lit. It's not dark either, but it's not brightly lit. And on the wallpaper, help me appears in glowing letters and then disappears again.
Yeah.
And it's effectively creepy.
Yeah. At one point when he and Clara are off by themselves, he draws a chalk circle on the floor, which is kind of like a magical working. Doesn't say anything about it, which is interesting. He just draws the circle. He's
documenting where the cold is,
right?
Because he's been stepping back and forth, noticing it getting warmer and colder, and then he draws a chalk circle on the floor to mark the cold spot.
Yeah, in the center of the house. That's like this music room is the center of the house and possibly the center of whatever's going, the phenomena that's going on. And as they leave the room, Clara walks across the circle. And there's a puff of steam from it that pops up. It's very, again, it's kind of cool. These little notes, these little things that the director added in, perhaps that wasn't in the script.
I'm trying to remember, but I don't think the disc that becomes the portal ever shows up until the Doctor draws the chalk circle. I'm trying to remember, though.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
So
that's true.
You could say the two are connected.
That's true. That's true.
Also, I like, as a character note, so they've been playing with the fact that Clara is different from other companions.
Yeah.
Like, they've stressed that she will stay when the Doctor tells her to stay, unlike every other companion. And here, the Doctor is like, okay, let's go find this ghost. And she's like, why would I want to do that? and
yeah, I'm with her.
And she resists going to the music room to find the ghost. And finally, she tells him the way to get her to do it. Dare me to do it. And so he dares her, and that lets her give herself emotional permission to go into the dangerous situation.
Yeah, that's a very interesting character trait. Also, she has no trouble telling the Doctor later on, Doctor, I'm a tiny bit terrified. Which is, Yeah.
Well, and that's a great moment because they're standing up with their backs against like the end of a corridor. And she's saying, Doctor, I don't mind telling you I am a little bit terrified at the moment. At the same time, I'm an adult and there's no need to hold my hand. And then he says, I'm not holding your hand.
And he holds his hands up. Oh, man, that is scary. Now, there's another moment. So Emma and Clara kind of connect at some point, and they're talking. And Emma tells Clara something about that. She says, don't trust the Doctor because there's a sliver of ice in his heart. Like, she has this empathic read on the Doctor. And I thought that was a very interesting, she's, warning Clara off. In a sense, as Who fans, we know that. I mean, the Doctor is alien, and at times he is very cold. And
there is also another reason, and we know that as viewers, as longtime viewers, we know the Doctor has this dark side, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't trust him.
Right.
But you at first think, oh, that's the explanation for what she's picking up on. But no, it's more than that.
Yeah.
As we find out at the end of the episode, she says to the Doctor, you didn't really come here for the ghost, did you? And he's like, no. Why did you come? You came here for me. Why? And it turns out the Doctor wants her as an empath to tell him her impressions of Clara, because the Doctor still does not trust Clara. She's the impossible girl. There's these weird things. She's seen her die twice. Is she some kind of trap that one of his enemies has set for him? And so he's been checking her out. And this episode, the way he checks her out is to take her into the presence of a psychic and let her have an adventure there. So her emotions are on display, and the psychic can then pick up on what's going on in her heart. And the psychic says, she's an ordinary girl.
However, apparently the TARDIS has picked up on the Doctor's mistrust or distrust of Clara too.
Or that something has caused the TARDIS to become hinky about Clara. And we get a form of resolution to that in this episode, because since the Doctor is trapped in this parallel world where the TARDIS cannot go and stay for more than a few seconds or it will become disabled and die because entropy. Right. Clara has to almost bully the TARDIS into rescuing the Doctor.
Yeah.
And the TARDIS, we get a rare appearance of the TARDIS voice virtual interface system, and it takes the form of Clara in order to talk to her.
Yes.
Which is nice because she's never seen that before.
Yep.
And all of a sudden she's standing there transparently talking to her, and the TARDIS is explaining why it can't go into the pocket universe to rescue the Doctor. And Clara's like, I hear you talking, but all I hear you saying is meh, 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 meh. And she basically bullies the TARDIS into going to rescue the Doctor. And that's what gets the TARDIS to trust her, is that she really does care about the Doctor.
Right.
Yeah.
And she's not a threat to him. She really is trying to rescue him and is willing to put herself in danger in order to save him.
Now,
well, there's a little mutual insults going on there, though, during this whole scene, because Clara calls the TARDIS the grumpy old cow.
Yes.
And the TARDIS says, I've picked the person you most esteem
as the visual interface. Yeah, or so.
Out of the millions of people in my
Cal."
database. Yeah.
That was
So
good.
I think there's
that.
a mutual dislike there that got overcome at that point.
Yeah, they've agreed to a détente by the end. Now, one of the cool things is the Doctor's got this hunch that the time traveler is stuck in time throughout the life cycle of the Earth, and so he takes Clara. They travel through the entire life cycle of Earth, hopping. It's got to be more than every few million years. He would have run out of film long before that because he grabbed Palmer's camera. But over
he's making a slideshow of
the
appearances of the ghost over the Earth's history.
Right. Yep. And so the one spot over the entire history of the Earth, which is really kind of cool, right to the end of the Earth's history. And Clara is really moved by this. She is really emotionally affected by this. I've seen the Earth born, live, and die. And she says she has this realization.
And apparently our understanding of the formation of the solar system is wrong, because the Doctor says we're about 6 billion years in the past, but modern science says the Earth is only 4.5 billion years old.
Somebody made a mistake at the BBC. But she says this to the Doctor. She says this realization: we're all ghosts to you. I'm dead out there. She means like outside the TARDIS, wherever on Earth. But I'm standing here talking to you, and we're nothing to you. She says, and he says, no, you're the only mystery worth solving. And I'm not sure whether I think maybe he's saying both humanity, but also Clara herself is a mystery worth solving.
It's deliberately ambiguous.
Yeah. So that was kind of a cool moment for Clara there. Although we know eventually Clara is probably not out there. She's dead, but not dead. So who knows?
She's in between her last heartbeats somewhere out in the universe.
Yeah. There is another cool moment where Emma has this line. She says, not everything ends, not love, not always, which is a kind of nice moment because it's true. Love, God is love, and love never ends, and God never ends. And so that's true. Other things will end, but love will never end. Love, truth, justice, those things will never end. So that is a kind of a moment of truth in Doctor Who.
And they pay that off in a way because so early on they established that in order for the ghost to manifest, there needs to be the presence of a powerful psychic, because the psychic can reach across the gulf between our universe and the pocket universe that the ghost is trapped in. And so Emma Grayling is able to do that, and so she's able to summon manifestations of the ghost. But I'm going, excuse me, the Doctor is a powerful psychic. Gallifreyans are telepaths, and he can download large quantities of information into someone's head with a simple headbutt.
Yeah.
Yep.
Why can't he manifest the ghost? Why is Emma Grayling needed? And eventually it's implied that it's because the future time traveler, Hilla Tokorian, from several centuries in the future, is a descendant of Emma Grayling and presumably Major Alec Palmer once they finally get busy, to quote The Incredibles.
Yes.
And so she does have a special connection that the Doctor wouldn't have with Hilla Tokorian.
Mm.
Yeah. Presumably even they might move, they would, raise their family in that house, which is what would make that location the connection, that psychic connection.
And it's a 400-year-old house. Hilla could have grown up in that house a few centuries from now.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
So the Doctor sets up what he calls a psychochronograph as a sort of amplifier for Emma's psychic power, and uses a piece of the Eye of Harmony in it.
Oh, well, it's more than that, but also the psychochronograph. That's nonsense technobabble.
Well, yeah.
Psycho and chrono make sense here, but graph? What is it measuring? Where's the readout? This is not a. This is like a psychochrono aperture or something.
Yeah.
Psychochrono
graph sounds cool. Sounds cool.
But the even though he says it's a subset of the Eye of Harmony, which does or doesn't make sense depending on what you stress about what they've said about the Eye of Harmony in the past. It's
Uh-huh.
the Eye of Harmony basically is the power source for the TARDIS.
Mhm.
And it is sometimes it is frequently described as a black hole. Sometimes it's described as being on Gallifrey, sometimes, in which case it has a kind of broadcast power, but it's also depicted as being on the TARDIS itself. So maybe it's both, you know, but if it's a black hole, it wouldn't have crystals as part of it.
Right.
This crystal is a blue crystal from the planet Metabilis 3.
Mhm.
And that will be very meaningful to Father Cory, not so much for
Yes.
Dom yet because he hasn't encountered it. But Father
didn't we-
Cory, you want to
didn't we
tell us
talk
about
about-
blue crystals from Metabilis 3?
Well, didn't we talk about Planet of Spiders?
Oh, well, maybe we did early
Oh.
on as our
'Cause
regenerations
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah.
Third Doctor.
So
It's not just in Planet of the Spiders, though. We have other references to blue crystals coming from, at least one other reference to blue crystals coming from Metabilis 3 in the Third Doctor's time.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
So
so
there-
this is a callback to the Third Doctor, as is the 1970s setting.
That's true.
Right.
That's true. Yeah. Presumably the Third Doctor is running around there somewhere in England.
Well, that was kind of one of my questions. Of why did the Doctor do the Ministry instead of Unit or something like that? But
I think they didn't have necessarily clearance for talking about Unit in this period. I forget.
that could be.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But yeah,
I think
these-
the unit only comes back with the 12th Doctor and Clara. When you have Lethbridge Stewart's daughter.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the Doctor jumps through the wormhole, grabs Hela, gets her back, but then it closes on him before he can get through. And the TARDIS starts ringing the cloister bell because the
Yeah.
Doctor is
Mhm.
stranded. It's an emergency. So it's interesting that the Doctor has this moment as he's running around in this pocket universe where he says,
Which is depicted as a forest, and I couldn't.
Yeah.
And there's like a pond there, and I couldn't help thinking the wood between the worlds.
yes, it's a very Lewis. He kind of calls the creature like the boogeyman under the bed, trying to make him afraid, and he admits being afraid, but the story undoes that. That isn't actually what the creature is doing, right?
Yeah, no. He correctly deduces that the reason he hasn't been eaten by the monster it's a little hard to describe visually. It's called the Crooked Man in some of the credits.
Mhm.
And it looks like a weirdly disfigured human that is low to the ground.
It's sort of mummified almost.
Yeah, and grayish and it looks kind of, if you've ever seen the series Falling Skies, it looks kind of like a skitter.
Oh,
Which is a kind of
I
alien.
forgot about that connection. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of low to the ground. It's got its legs splayed out unnaturally. It may have more than two legs, but we don't get good looks at it because they use these jerky camera cuts whenever we see it. We either see it very briefly, and we've seen it in the house in our world, but we also see it in the woods in the Pocket universe. And whenever it's moving around, we only get brief, jerky cuts of it. Even when it's like right up in the Doctor's face, we have this very tightly edited series of cuts that are rapid until the end, when he's realized it's actually not a threat. It's just trying to be reunited with its love monster over in our universe. And at that point, the camera stabilizes and we don't have the jump cuts. And instead, he gets a look at its head, which is sort of shaped like a human head, but is missing a bunch of features and is asymmetrical.
Kind of Snoke-ish.
It is kind of like Snoke, only less defined.
Yeah.
And he says, "Oh, you Romeo." But I like the directing. I normally don't think. Some people think a lot about direction and camera angles. I think much more about dialogue and plot.
Yeah.
But here, I really liked the directing, where we have, as long as it's perceived as a threat, we get the jumpy camera cuts.
Right.
But then once it's not, we don't. The camera is no longer treating it as a threat for the audience.
It's sort of a classic New Who trope, isn't it? This idea of, something is a monster based on our perception of it, what it looks like sometimes, or lack of knowledge of its motives, and then once it becomes known, it's less scary.
Not just New Who. I mean, the third Doctor would constantly yell at the Brigadier about that kind of stuff.
That's true. That's true. Like with the
Silurians.
Silurians. Keeps want to say sleep stacks. Silurians.
Yeah.
That was a big version of that one. So, and that's where we come to the end. We already talked about how the Doctor went back for the creatures to bring the creature to its mate. Although, are they leaving them here?
No.
Presumably.
Yes. Yeah. They're apparently. I mean, we don't. It's interesting the timing of how the ending plays, because we know what the Doctor's gonna do. He's gonna go there and rescue it, and so he has Emma open the door and let him into the woods again. And then he finds the monster and he's like saying, okay, here it comes, grab on. And the way he got out of the pocket universe the first time, because the TARDIS cannot survive there for more than a few seconds, was Clara and the TARDIS rapidly flew through the woods and he grabbed onto the outside of the TARDIS. And then they came back to our universe. And so he's going to do that now with the monster.
Yeah.
And so as the TARDIS is swinging towards him, he tells the monster, okay, grab on. And then whoosh, the TARDIS comes by and we have a black screen.
Yep.
So apparently he's brought the boy monster to our universe to be with the girl monster. And as he says, it's not a horror story, it's a love story. It's boy monster meets girl monster, gets their stars are not aligned and they get separated and get back together. So
Romeo and Juliet.
Boy monster, girl monster romance.
Hopefully he takes them someplace where they can live in peace and not wander around in the British forest having baby monsters that scare the people. All right. So, and that's the end. Any other notes, Father Cory?
So there just one scene I kind of got a chuckle of where Emma and Clara are talking, and Clara gives Emma a glass of whiskey.
Yeah.
And would rather have tea, or I can't remember or what it was that she's rather have. But Emma says, whiskey's the 11th most disgusting thing ever invented. And all I can say is, no, wrong. A good glass of whiskey is
yes, one of the
awesome.
Greatest things.
One of the greatest pleasures of life.
Clara says that, and I wonder what she thinks the top 10 are.
Yeah, exactly.
However, her sentiment is widely shared. I'm not.
Oh, I know.
Most of the whiskey I've ever had is like, ugh, why would anyone?
Mm-hmm.
It's an acquired
enjoy
taste.
That? Yeah,
it's an acquired taste.
Acquired. Jimmy, any final notes?
So this is an interesting, the country manor stories are frequently another kind of base under siege. And that's essentially what we have here. But this is almost a bottle show. I mean, it doesn't occur on the TARDIS, but it basically all occurs on one set namely the manor, with some detours into the forest, which could be around the manor. And it's got a really small cast.
Yeah.
It's just the Doctor and Clara, the only other characters other than the monster, but the only other characters that have screen time are the Major and Emma Grayling, the psychic. It's these four people. And
well,
it's still
Gila.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, yes, you're right.
Yeah.
Gila, the time traveler, is also there. So, but it's still this really small cast, and it's a nice story. I did not remember much about it from when I'd watched it years ago. I remember liking it okay. I remember liking the 70s, setting of it. But I really liked it a lot more this time. I thought it was very effective. There was a lot of nice little things that they did to create the creepy atmosphere that you want in a haunted house story. We mentioned, for example, I really like the help me that appears and disappears on the wall as you're looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
Also, as they're getting ready to use the weird device to open the doorway, like the clocks start running backwards and things like that, which doesn't really make sense, but it's really cool and creepy. And I just enjoyed this a lot.
I liked it a lot more this time through. I think mostly because I already knew it wasn't a ghost story, really. So I wasn't as creeped out and scared as I would normally be.
Well, I figured, they're never going to have a literal dead person's ghost on Doctor Who. It's always going to be a data ghost or a time traveler or something. But what I liked about it is how the Doctor, there's always going to be some kind of naturalistic Scooby-Doo explanation. Psychic powers is as far as they go on Doctor Who. Beyond that, they don't go into the supernatural.
Yeah, or aliens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so there's always going to be some kind of Scooby-Doo ending where it's not an actual ghost. But I liked how the Doctor didn't do any advanced preaching on that
Mm-hmm.
point. If you don't know any other episode of the show, I mean, the Doctor's taken the ghost, the idea it's a ghost, entirely seriously.
Right.
He's
Right.
not poo-pooing it at all. Now, he does find an alternative explanation, which is good. That's what parapsychologists do. They consider the range of what could explain this phenomena and don't just assume it's a ghost. They're open to it being a ghost, but they're also open to it being something else. And the Doctor was behaving in that way very believably from a paranormal investigation point of view, but also he wasn't preaching at us. And he
No.
was open to this
Yeah.
experience. And I just like that. I
Mm.
like it when the Doctor is not a know-it-all, where he's not trying to debunk stuff. And he's open to more possibilities than a typical secular Westerner would be.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, and I agree that this was a fun one. This was good.
Oh, absolutely.
All right, I think that should do it for this time. As we wrap up, I want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Doctor Who, including Rachel T., Angie N., Elizabeth M., Matthew M., and Dion. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Doctor Who and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. And we'd also like to thank Victor Lambs, who edits the show for us every week. So that's it from us. So what did you think of the 11th Doctor story, Hide? Let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com or the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page, or send us an email to drwho@sqpn.com. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing Modern Undead, a 5th Doctor story.
Ooh, Brigadier comes back.
Nice. Until then, Father Cory Sticha, thank you for joining me and sharing the Secrets of Doctor Who.
Well, thank you, Dom.
Jimmy Akin, thank you as well.
Thanks, Tom.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Doctor Who on StarQuest. And remember, you are the only mystery worth solving. Hi, everyone. This is Dom Bettinelli, CEO of StarQuest, with a special message as we approach the Christmas season. This past year, the StarQuest network has continued to expand our mission of exploring the intersection of faith and pop culture through our many entertaining and informative programs. Now we need your generous financial support to reach new audiences with more of the life-changing and uplifting programming we've been creating for more than a decade. That's why it's very important that we hear from you this Advent and Christmas, the time when nonprofits receive most of their support for the year. If you are already a supporter of StarQuest, we thank you and ask you to prayerfully consider increasing your support at this time. If you're not yet a supporter, please become one now. Every gift counts. Could you give $15 or even just $10 per month? Whatever level of support you can offer, please show your support for SQPN this Christmas. And remember that your gifts may be tax deductible. Just go to sqpn.com/give. That's sqpn.com/give. May God bless you this Advent, and may you have a blessed Christmas season.